got Rocky Mountain National Park. And so a small portion of Erie supplies come from local ditch irrigation ditches within the town service area or nearby. However, the majority of supplies come from from the Colorado Big Thompson project and the Windy Gap project that is located west of the Rocky Mountain National Park. These are the main reservoirs of those two projects. And water is delivered through a tunnel underneath Rocky Mountain National Park and then through a series of canals and reservoirs along the Front Range. And Erie's water is transported all the way down to Boulder Reservoir, and there's a pipeline that then conveys it over to Eerie. So it's a fascinating project, or two projects essentially, that really provide a significant water source for the town of Eerie. And so when it comes to water efficiency, why is it important? Why is it important to the town? And so when we're thinking about the benefits, one that really pops out right away is the environmental stewardship piece. Within Erie's town vision document, the comprehensive plan, it calls for the natural stewardship of its natural resources, and water being one of those #1 natural resources moving forward. Another is sustainability. As we had mentioned, Erie's population is increasing, but that's not only within the town of Eerie. The state of Colorado's population is dramatically increasing, particularly in Northeast Colorado along the I-25 corridor. And with that increase, it's becoming more and more important to use our water sustainably and think about the future and being proactive in how we do that. And so Eerie is a leader in water efficiency. This update of this water efficiency plan is actually Erie's third plan. Its original plan was done in 2008. And so Eerie has really been involved in this field of water conservation and efficiency for quite some time. And with the increase of population, there comes increased competition for water. Water is a finite resource. And so with that increase, there's an increase in costs. So by saving water and using less of it, that can really provide some long-term cost savings in regards to how much more water needs to be acquired in the long term, capital expenditures in regards to water and possible expansions of water treatment plants in the future. And also from a billing standpoint, from that individual customer level, if you're using less water, your water bill is lower. And so that's an important thing to remember too. And so proactive planning, really thinking about the future, the fact that water is finite, that the population is increasing. And so what can the town do to be sustainable in the future and start now moving forward? So how has Eerie been doing? Well, I mentioned with the increase in population, which is this black line along here, as we're seeing this occur, and this is from 2000 to 2020, the demands have been increasing, which is shown by these columns. And there's different, you can really call this different colors of water. So within Eerie, you have treated water. A good chunk of that is this CBT and the Windy Gap water that's conveyed over from the mountains. There's ditch water, and some of this ditch water is actually not treated. It's used for non-potable irrigation, so there's some energy savings there. And the blue, reuse water. And so there's a certain portion of Erie's water supply which comes from the Windy Gap project that is reusable. And so this is just showing you how much of that water has been reused as well moving forward. So in regards to the amount of water that's being used per person, or you could call this per capita water use, that's been going down, which is really good news if you're looking at water efficiency. The purple here is showing what the per capita water use has been as a system-wide. So that includes residential, commercial, irrigation. The red is showing what your residential, so just really focusing on your homeowner, your single family, your multifamily homes, that too has been going down over time. And this is a function of Eerie being more water efficient. It's also a function of improved technologies with fixtures and appliances over time, as well as land use changes, where over time development has become denser in the sense of smaller yards, wiser landscaping, and that too can contribute to the reduction of per capita water use. So what is Eerie trying to accomplish? What are the goals? First one is establishing essential elements to build on. So within the past few years, Eerie has hired Tyler Kessler, the Sustainability and Water Conservation Specialist. and also just hired Dylan King, a water conservation technician. And so that provides more full-time employees focused on sustainability and water conservation. Also focusing on low-hanging fruit when it comes to water waste from irrigation, focusing on technologies that really can help improve water efficiency that doesn't necessarily just rely on the customer behavior piece of things. So just getting a firm foundation. So that's one of the goals. Another one, and I'm going to have another slide that really focuses on this, is approaching water and land use planning from a holistic standpoint. So I'll get into more detail on that in a moment, but that's also an important aspect of what Eerie's wanting to accomplish. And I mentioned that there's a certain portion of Erie supply that can be reused, and that's the Windy Gap water. And so one of our goals is to maximize that, be able to reuse that as much as possible. And last but not least, this is what we can call as a 10 in 10, which is a 10% water savings in 10 years. So what this means is if you look at this blue line, that's the projected water demands from 2021, so this year up until 2030, so in 10 years. And that blue line is kind of baseline conditions. So assuming an average per capita water use that we saw around 2015 and 2019. What the goal is to reduce that, so that's the green line. The green line is the goal, to reduce that by various water efficiency measures to where you see by 2030 a 10% savings. So this here, the difference here is about 10%. So what is the town doing? Well, some of the basics, we have no water wasting right in the center here. And there's an ordinance that Erie has that really is do not waste water. And that's going to be revisited and updated again this year. Also, in terms of metering, Erie meters water before it enters the water treatment plant, after it enters the water treatment plant. It meters your customer meter, so a customer meter, so your meter and your water bill at your house that's closely metered, and you get a bill for how much water you use per month. That's a foundational aspect too of volumetric billing. Also, if you ended up using more water, there's a tiered rate structure. So if you could go use more water than the tier 1 structure, then you end up paying more water per gallon if you entered a tier 2 or tier 3 structure over time. And so these are some foundational measures that are critically important that Erie focuses on from a water efficiency standpoint. Also, there's outdoor irrigation. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on every single program that we've been doing in terms of time, but Erie, and from a standpoint when it comes to parks, makes a lot of effort in being water efficient through cycle and soak methods, from irrigating primarily in the evening times when evaporation is a lot lower and you don't have the intense sun shining down. Erie also really is installing control meters in the sense, or meters that are able to control your irrigation remotely, which provides a much more efficient means of being able to react if you have a rainstorm, or being able to shut your system off directly. And also the parks are looking at installing lower water use vegetation, so xeriscaping, both on new parks as well as replacing some of the turf grass that's in lower trafficked areas with xeriscaping. Also, Erie, from a policy standpoint, when it comes to medians, you'll see more and more medians throughout the community that will have low water use vegetation as opposed to turf grass on that, using drip irrigation. And so these are some aspects that the town is working on. The town also has a variety of measures when it comes to working with different residences on irrigation. They offer a variety of programs to from natural resources, such as a garden in a box, which is a box literally that residents can purchase that has seeds from various water efficient plants, perennial plants that can be planted and used with a drip system to use a lot less water, and a variety of other options that residents can purchase to save water, including outdoor irrigation audits. So I encourage you as a resident, if you're interested, to go on Erie's website and take a look at what those options would be available to you. Also, in terms of education and targeted options that are available for Erie residents, Erie offers a variety of rebates, both for clothes washers and for toilets. And so again, please go online to take a look at those options. Also, once your meter's replaced with a smart meter, the Eerie is in the process of replacing all meters with smart meters. That enables you to be able to download an app onto your phone, and then you're able to monitor how much water you're using throughout the month. And so, for instance, if you see a huge spike in your water use, that could be indicative of a possible leak that you can catch and have replaced and fixed much sooner and avoid that high water bill at the end of the month. Eerie also has programs targeted on helping HOAs and businesses in promoting water efficiency. HOAs and businesses can enroll into a program where they meet certain green criteria, and the green criteria do focus on water efficiency. That enables them to be recognized by the Eerie Chamber of Commerce, which can really help from a business standpoint in being a green business or a green HOA moving forward. And in terms of water and land use planning, so the Colorado Water Plan, which is the state's water plan, calls for a goal that by 2025, 75% of Coloradans live in an area that really focuses on incorporating water into land use planning. And so as we look at this beautiful picture of Eerie here and moving forward, Erie is a wonderful place to live. And so how can this be done sustainably and in a manner that really looks at the future and how water is critically important to that future and how land use relates to that? And so if we look at some of Erie's values, it's one of the best places to raise a family. It's also a place that really wants to foster new, good, sustainable business. And how can that be done in a manner in which is sustainable? And so Erie's in the process, or just about to start the process of updating their comprehensive plan. And this document really lays out the vision for what Erie's to look like. In a lot of ways, it brings in a lot of public input as well. And so this will be a great opportunity to also consider water moving forward in Erie's land use planning. So with that, I'm going to hold off and go back and just ask if there's anyone on the panel that would like to add some additional comments or have any additional things they would like to say about the water efficiency plan and program before I go into the drought piece of things. Okay, I'm going to move into the drought piece and then we can open it up for more discussion after that. So when it comes to Erie's drought and water shortage plan, one thing I do want to speak to is that drought and water shortage, while they can be the same thing, they're also different in the sense that a water shortage can occur from a drought situation, but water shortage can also occur from other factors. For instance, the failure of a significant infrastructure where there's not an actual drought. And so this plan itself covers both shortages that are caused by drought or shortages in general. And so looking at this slide, a critical point about drought to make is that drought is a normal thing. It's a normal climatic thing that we experience in Colorado, which is a semi-arid environment. And so if you look here at this graph below, there's a time series that starts around 2000 and goes out to current day. This is showing the percentage of Colorado that has been in drought. So whether it's in abnormally dry, which is the yellow, to the exceptional drought in the really dark red, it's showing that throughout the past 20 years, most of Colorado has, or a part of Colorado has been in drought at some point for most of the 20 years. And so again, just back to that drought is is a normal climatic condition within the state. And this is something that with climate change that will continue. And that climate change is showing that we could experience more frequent, intense droughts of longer duration. And so this is important to consider as we move into the future as well. Now, the upper corner here is showing what the state of Colorado was in terms of drought conditions March 9th. So this is prior to just the big snowstorm that we just had. But as you can see, most of the state all the state here is in some level of drought. And so as we move into the springtime, this is something the town of Eerie is really looking at and watching, particularly since we're just at the onset of the irrigation season that's going to be starting within the next month or so. So what is a water shortage and drought plan? And if you look at psychologically how humans generally relate to drought. And this is just a kind of a common diagram in drought circles is here we are and it's raining, everything is good. People kind of get kind of lazy, things are good, no big deal. Then you enter drought, and the drought continues, and that's when people start to become more aware. And if the drought continues and it's intense enough, people start to get concerned. And then if it's long enough, people might start to panic. And so what does a drought plan do? Well, first off, it's about being prepared and stopping that cycle and defining why we're doing this at the onset. And the best time to do drought planning is actually when it's more in the rainy condition. And so that you're being proactive as opposed to being reactive when you enter a drought situation. And so drought plans look at maintaining health and safety, community vitality, and long-term resiliency. And how this down is both on the supply and a drought and a demand side. So from the supply side, and this is common throughout Colorado, if there's a shortage, municipalities will often lease supplies from other entities, from other water providers in the area that can help meet that gap that's being experienced on a temporary basis. They can also reduce the amount of water they're using. So by saving water, reducing the demand piece of things. And that's what we're going to get into more right now. So resilience is a big word when it comes to drought. How can you be resilient to drought? And the upper left-hand corner here, it says, do you bend or break? And that's really a lot of what drought planning is. You want to establish a strong foundation so that you do not break, but that you're able to bend when you need to ensure that you have that strong backbone. And a piece of this is really remembering that it's not just one thing, that it's the environmental piece, the economic piece, and social piece. So really working together as a community to minimize those impacts across the board. And then over here in the bottom left-hand corner, there's that togetherness. So working together. And the critical thing to highlight here is when you get to drought response, you're not just talking about, well, what can the town do, which has a really strong role in educating customers, educating the public, trying to save water themselves, for instance, the park saving water. Also, the community, the customers have a strong role also in reducing their water use. And so a key point of the part of the planning is looking at what is Erie's priorities. And if you think analogous of a top here, this is kind of analogous to the top. The bottom reach here, the point is the foundation. So you really need that point if you have a top and you're trying to spin it. And so that foundational piece when it comes to high priorities for Erie is the health and safety, the indoor water at hospitals, at schools, in your homes to make sure you have drinking water as well as for sanitary purposes. The rainbow part here, well, that's still an important part and support for the top. It's not the tip down here, but it's also foundational. And that gets into second priority items, which is your indoor commercial, your economy, high priority irrigation, and your commercial and town uses. So when it comes to high priority irrigation, that can be anything from your trees that are important to preserve, as well as say irrigation on ball fields to ensure that the turf is maintained well for safety, for our kids playing baseball or playing sports on the fields. And then up here at the top part, well, that's really important for our top in terms of making it work well. It's not necessarily it's not as fundamental as the very bottom. And so this is the medium to low priority irrigation. So this could be some of that Kentucky bluegrass in areas where it's not highly trafficked, that if you don't water for a while, it becomes dormant and it turns brown, but it can come back when the weather gets cooler. So that area that's not as critical from the irrigation standpoint. So the drought plan has 4 stages. Stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, 4 being the emergency situation. And I'm going to kind of go backwards and first speak to the emergency. So that's the red here. The emergency is a type of drought that we have not seen in historical record. It'd be something that would definitely persist for 2 to 3 longer years. And it would be a situation that would be die hard. The essence of it would come down to where you would really need to be preserving that water for indoor purposes. That's something that would likely not happen, although it's possible. And so from a planning standpoint, it's important to look at worst case scenario, and that's worst case scenario. And just, again, not being reactive, but being proactive by having that in a plan. If we step back more to stage 1, and this is more of a situation that we could be entering this year, which is voluntary, where the total reduction target would be around 10% or 10%-ish. And in this sort of situation, what it would look like, it would be strongly voluntary with a lot of education to customers, encouraging water efficiency, encouraging them to be very mindful of how much water is being used, and that the parks would have around a 10% savings target. Stage two is if the drought persists, the savings target could increase. This still would likely be more voluntary with just even more emphasis and on education and awareness being built throughout the community. If, however, the target is not being met, the Erie's designated, mandatory restrictions could come into place here, and that would also require some level of enforcement. At stage three, this would be a fairly significant drought to enter stage three for the town of Erie. Here, your target could be anywhere from 20 to 45%. This would definitely be mandatory restrictions, and if the target could not be achieved through mandatory, there may be a possibility here where more your low and medium priority irrigation could be prohibited. But again, that is a situation where it'd be quite a severe drought, and also there would be a lot of education in advance of that before anything of that sort of nature would persist in the community. So in terms of where we're at right now, both of the plans are in this public review process, and the plans are posted online here. I encourage you to go and look at that at erieco.us/waterplans. On the site, you're able to look at each of these plans, read them through, provide comments. There's also an option here to fill out a questionnaire, which I highly encourage, particularly if you do not have time to look at all the two plans. The questionnaire itself is really helpful in terms of both informing the plans as well as the water efficiency program and drought response in the future. So with that said, I'd like to ask again if the panelists would like to add anything else, and then we'll be opening up for a question and answers. So thank you very much.
That's great, Courtney. Thanks for the presentation there. I appreciate it. It looks like a couple questions have come in. So at this time, unless the panelists would like to ask any questions to Courtney with the presentation, we can hop into question and answer time. All right. Well, feel free to hop in either way. Again, my name is Tyler Kessler, Sustainability and Water Conservation Specialist at the town of Erie. I've been working alongside Courtney and staff at all levels throughout the town of Erie, as well as external stakeholders, a couple that we have on the phone call today with Northern Water to put together these two updated plans for this year. As Courtney mentioned, they're currently in review process online. You can download those plans, make comments, submit them until April 15th. And at that point, we'll take all of the comments and add or take away anything to the plans and make our final edits, and then present to the Board of Trustees for adoption in May. So one of the first questions that came in that is on the top of all of our minds as we are in our second year of extreme drought is, are we in a drought now? And do we have to limit our water usage? Would anybody like to grab that one? I'm happy to answer as well. So my answer to that is yes, we are still in a drought, albeit we had two great snowstorms lately that have helped. But being in the second year of drought, there's still over 90% of the state that is still considered in drought. Maybe not as extreme as it was a couple weeks ago. But again, as Courtney mentioned several times throughout her presentation, we're really focused on being proactive and not reactive. And so getting ourselves used to using less water, both on our landscapes as well as inside of our homes, as well as our businesses and HOAs, really helps us when we do need to go into drought restrictions. And so the more that we can get used to that and continue to save water proactively, the less we'll have to react, and it'll be less of a shock to our systems. The second question that came in, I think, Frank, you might be able to take this one. It says, thank you so much for caring about water in Erie. How can my HOA conserve water? The sprinklers seem to always be running. Mary asked that question.
Yes, thank you so much, Mary. This is an important topic, and I'm glad you're observing the water use in your community. What we find is that over time, irrigation systems can degrade. They can start to get tilted or sunken or have breaks. And just like any mechanical device, it's a really good idea to have a regular checkup done. So for those type of commercial uses, Northern Water helps out Erie by offering services to provide an evaluation of commercial HOA, business, municipal properties. So for your community, what we would suggest is to contact us to start the evaluation process. And the first thing we would do is take a look at your system from your water bills, and we could perform a water use benchmark. And that's a really great way to see if you're using the right amount of water for your landscape type and age, and then how much water the landscape needs based on how hot it's been. And so from there, you might be using just the right amount, and that could be why you're seeing so much water being applied, or you could be using quite a bit more, or even possibly less. From there, we want to take a look at the system on the ground, and that's going to be done through an audit where professionals will walk around and they'll look at every zone and they'll see just how efficiently the water is being applied by your sprinklers. And from that, they'll create a report and send that to you with some suggestions and recommendations on what they found and what can be improved. And we would then like to work with you in a follow-up visit where our team comes to see your system, look at your landscape, and hear your concerns, and then we can provide you a follow-up. And we do that ideally after the audit has been performed, so we can read the audit to have an understanding of how your system looks on the irrigation side when we also look at the plant material. And then if we discover through the consultation with you that you have an opportunity to improve your system, whether it's an irrigation upgrade or a landscape change, we offer a grant where we match your amount of investment up to $20,000 to help make those changes. In some cases, it could be new irrigation system components, because there are some really important changes that have happened over the years, or it could be a renovation where you remove portions of the landscape that just don't make sense. That change, if you decide to pursue it, has to be done in concert with the city of Erie, so or the town of Erie. So it's important to make sure that you're following the guidelines and protocols. But we offer these services free for you. And I put a little link here in the Q&A where you can start by submitting a request for a consultation and an audit, and then we'll get you on the list. So we can talk about how to help you in ways that make sense for your community.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Frank. Does anybody else have anything to add to that? All right. You just made some HOA residents' day. I'm sure they will bring this to their boards and have a conversation with it. And we're here to help at the town of Erie. So let us know. The next couple questions talk about, Courtney, what we mentioned in the presentation with the 10 and 10 theme, the 10% reduction in 10 years. It looks like David asked, what's the rationale for targeting the 10% reduction over 10 years? And is that enough? The next question talks about, if the town achieves 10% reduction in 10 years, will our water rates decrease?
Okay.
Courtney, do you maybe want to take that first one and I can take the second one?
Sure, no problem. So yes, in terms of the 10% in 10 years, we really took a comprehensive look at that. We looked at what the per capita water use is on an average basis from 2015 to 2019, and looked at what those historical trends were, which I showed you the graph on. And from that information, we looked at, well, what do we think will happen in the future for that per capita standpoint as well? Will we continue to follow existing trends? Does that seem realistic? And based on that analysis and a variety of input from multiple staff, we came up with what we felt like would be a realistic goal over the course of the next 10 years. Also, the 10 and 10 is a little catchy. It's easy to remember, which we think is really helpful from a public outreach standpoint. And so it also had that benefit. And it's something that would be closely monitored. And if we can do better than that, that's great. And the goal, though, is 10 and 10 for now. And the conservation plan by state statutes required to be updated every 7 years. So it's something that would be revisited over time. It's not necessarily set in stone. So it's kind of a target that we have for now, and we'll reassess that in the future and see how we're doing and either increase it or decrease at that point in time.
Yep, absolutely. And I'd be remiss not to mention that in our last water efficiency plan, the town of Erie had set goals, gallons per capita per day. And we knocked those out of the park as a town. So that's something to celebrate. And this is moving the notch a little bit more forward with the 10 and 10 with that. And simply just doing our due diligence, contributing to the goals set in the Colorado water plan. We'd really like to lead by example in the town. And use less water than we need to use, as stated in that plan as well. So a little bit less eloquent of an answer, but I did want to celebrate that we knocked it out of the park with the last plan with that. So the next question talks about the water rate decreases. If we reach that 10 and 10, our water rate's going to decrease. With long range planning, I guess the simple answer to that is no, because in long range planning, our rates are usually determined based on the cost to receive, treat, and distribute water. The tiers are structured to incentivize lower water use. So while the rates will not go down, you can lower your bill personally with controlling your demand. So the less water that you use, the less that you're going to pay for the water. But in terms of long range planning, we have to account for infrastructure as well as the treatment of the water and the distribution of that water. So the next question that we have here mentions wildfires. We had a year of wildfires last year. A little bit, they're becoming much more common than they used to historically. And the question says, how have wildfires affected the town's water? Luke, would you be able to maybe handle that?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. So Courtney did a pretty good job of explaining the Colorado Big Thompson project. So at Northern Water, we run the Colorado Big Thompson project, which is CBT water, it's Windy Gap water, and we divert that water on the west slope. We bring it through the Adams Tunnel and we deliver it over here on the east slope. So the East Troublesome fires that happened last October burned about 30% of the basins above our system on the west slope. So about 30% of our supply is now from lands that were essentially burned. So what that's going to do to the water supply is, I don't have a solid answer. It's really going to add a lot of uncertainty to our operations. We're going to see more ash coming into our system, more debris coming in, more sedimentation, and all of those things are going to affect how we operate the system and potentially even reduce the yield of our project. So, we might be able to divert less water through the Adams Tunnel than we typically would pre-fire. I say there's a lot of uncertainty. We're getting close to the time of year where we start seeing snow melt and run off into our system. So we're going to learn a whole lot in the next few months about really what our future looks like over the next few years dealing with the wildfire. But in the end, there's going to be more uncertainty and most likely some kind of reduction in yield from the project. So how does that affect the town of Erie? A good portion, most I think, of the town of Erie's water supply comes from the CBT project and the Windy Gap project. So there may be in future years just less water from the project. I will say this year we're in pretty good shape. We are above average in terms of water supply in the project right now. But Tyler fielded a question about drought earlier. So we had the big snowstorm, a week ago or so. That dumped a whole lot of water on the east slope, but it didn't really do much for us on the west slope. So over there where we collect water in our CBT system, the snowpack's not great, and the forecast for how much water we're going to get out of it is not great as well. So drought is here, and I think it's going to be here for a while, unfortunately. So we're kind of dealing with that on top of the fires as well. So that's what I've got, Tyler.
Great, Luke. Thank you so much for that. Bad news. But that's why we're here, being proactive and putting together these plans. As many of us know, in Erie, there's a lot of development going on. Ruth actually earlier this week asked, I've been wondering where they were going to get water, being Erie, for all the new Erie housing developments. Will that mean that the old residents will have to cut back on water use because of that? The short answer to that is no. The town of Erie's water portfolio is sufficient for our build out, what we're anticipating to be built out for. But it also means that the new homes use less water due to water saving fixtures and smaller lawns a lot of times. Developers, however, do pay the dedication fee to cover the cost. of the water that they intend to use. And so because the developers pay for that infrastructure, which is the most significant cost of the growth, the cost of operations do tend to increase over time. Like everything else, food, gasoline, electricity, et cetera, water rates reflect the cost of delivering that water, kind of as I described previously. While the population to pay the bills increases, the cost to deliver the water tends to go up with the same issues, with increased staff, increased regulatory requirements, and aging infrastructure that is needed to repair or replace that. So I think that really kind of talks about the development quite a bit. Also, as neighbors continue to move into the town of Erie, as new businesses are built, as the town continues to thrive, we really want to set that precedent and set that culture of conserving water and being most efficient with our water. As folks move in from other states or other towns, we really want to welcome them into town and share with them pretty quickly of our goals and values as a town in conserving water. So if you have neighbors that just moved in, share with them all the opportunities that we provide as a town, and please connect them with these plans and our goals, and we can all achieve those goals together. Let's see, what's the next question that we have here? We talked about wildfires, we talked about development. One of them is simply just kind of a quick action item. It's actually our last question here, unless there's any more that have come in. How can I start conserving water? Very simple and sweet. What can I do? It says, and maybe I can pass this over to Dylan for a short answer here, as he's just hired on and as the water conservation technician.
Yeah, absolutely. So conserving water it's great, and it's relatively easy to do. It can be as simple as just changing your behaviors around the house, making sure that you're fixing leaks. I actually just figured out that my shower is leaking this morning, so now I've got something to do this weekend. And then the town of Erie also has a couple of different offerings that you can take advantage of, such as rebates for water saving measures, changing out shower heads, aerators, new washing machines, things like that. And then you can also take advantage of sprinkler consultations from Resource Central that the town helps to provide. So you can get a little bit of a handle on your irrigation system, make sure you're watering efficiently and doing it the right way. So yeah, I think that's all I've got there.
Yep, absolutely. And as we celebrate World Water Day today, sorry, I thought I was muted for a second. As we celebrate World Water Day today, this presentation and Q&A is very relevant. We continue to understand more and more that water plays an integral part of each other's lives, and how we operate as a society. Water truly interacts with everything. I played a little bingo game earlier today, just identifying how many things in our life are controlled by water, and the input of that water, and having that infrastructure and having clean water. So it is kind of fun to think throughout your day and look around, even the room that we're in right now, to see all the things that depend on water for life. There's something that we can always do to make those improvements and make those efficiency gains. And so I really encourage that, and taking a look at the town's water efficiency and programs offerings, and everybody has a chance to contribute to our town's goals with that. So really excited to update these plans and launch these plans. Again, we're in public input until April 15th. Until then, you can take a look at the plans and provide your questions and comments, and we'll get back to you as soon as they come in, and take under consideration and of editing those plans before we present those to the Board of Trustees for adoption in May there. So that website again is erieco.us/water-plans. And it looks like Gabby also put that in the chat function too, for you to access. I don't see any other questions there. So without further ado, does the panel have any other input they would like to give for these water plans before we sign off here? Thanks again for your time, everybody. All right, I think we're great here. Gabby, again, thanks for setting this up for the town here. And thank you, panel, for your time this evening on a wonderful Monday evening. But this is our way to celebrate World Water Day. So here we are. But yeah, again, appreciate everybody's time, and for everybody signing in and asking the questions and being involved.
And thanks to everybody else. I will be uploading this video as well as the presentation PowerPoint to that water page that Tyler just mentioned. So you can all view it there and share it with all of your friends.